The Literary Corner, brought to you by New York Parrot TV. Hi, this is the most amazing collection I have read so far. I'm a reading-aholic. Dustin Pickering, you know me from Parrot Literary Corner. This is the Literary Parrot, available at Amazon.com and its various affiliates. If you have not seen this collection, it's 249 pages of glorious global literature in a contemporary vein. This covers a lot of subjects from the coronavirus to violence on the streets, to love, to romance. Everything you can imagine is in this collection, and you should buy it now. I'll tell you why. It's a collection of unique voices from the Literary Parrot. People have been on our show, have been participated in this, or have been published on our website, newyorkparrot.com. So please, I implore you, buy a copy. Thank you.
Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hello, welcome to New York Parrot's Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. Today we have our Nicolas Macioci, who earned his PhD from the Ohio State University and for 30 years taught for the Columbus City Schools. In addition to English, he taught drama and developed a writer's seminar for select students. OCTELA, the Ohio Council of Teachers of English, named Nick Macioci the best secondary English teacher in the state of Ohio. Nick is the author of 2 chapbooks, Cafes of Childhood and Greatest Hits, as well as 9 books, Why Dance, Necessary Windows, Cafes of Childhood, the original chapbook with additional poems, Mother Goose, Occasional Heaven, A Human Saloon, Rustle, Rustle, Thump, Thump, Rough, and Dark Guitar. Critics and judges called Cafes of Childhood a beautifully harrowing account of child abuse, but not sentimental or self-pitying. An amazing book and a single unified whole. Cafes of Childhood was submitted for the Pulitzer Prize in 1992. In 2021, he was nominated for Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net Award. Forthcoming books are Stony Seasons and A Feast of Losses. He is currently at work on My Hands Fell Empty. In addition, more than 200 of his poems have been published here and abroad in magazines and journals, including Chiron, Concho River Review, the Bombay Review, Painted Bride Quarterly, the Comstock Review, and Blue Unicorn. He has won many awards, including first place in the 1987 National Writers Union Poetry Competition, judged by Denise Levertov, first place in the Baudelaire Award Competition, sponsored by the World Order of Narrative and Formalist Poets, 1989, second place in Zone 3's first annual Rainmaker Awards, judged by Howard Nemerov in 1989, and second place in the Writer's Digest annual competition, judged by Diane Wachowski in 1991. I hope he's with us today. Is our guest available, or should I move forward? So I'm guessing he is not available. So what I'm going to do, and hopefully he'll arrive soon. I apologize for his delay. I'm going to read from my book, The Stone in the Square. If you do not have a copy of this book, it's available on Amazon.com and from Hawako Publishers. If you're in India, you can buy it direct from them. Dustin Pickering, that's my name, Stone in the Square. I'm going to read a couple of poems from this. This book is dedicated to my girlfriend Timberlake and her son Henry. And these are all love poems on a sort of philosophical bent. And you'll get a sample here of what I mean by that. How can I complain about doves and eagles when your stars blind me completely? I am in darkness while waiting for your soul to reach across the rivers of forms. The moon turns yellow and thinks the graces of time belong to this earth. Yet moons cannot think unless possessed with love. Turn my empty face from the truth. Again, loneliness is not a vice. And that's an untitled poem from the section Witch Hazel. It's the last section in the book. I'll read you another poem from this collection. This is a very short, little, minuscule poem. Gravity pulls us together by holding us apart. Through winter worrisomeness, we wait as we embark. The ship is cast to light. Empty thoughts prevail over dreams' perfection. Such is not what it seems. I like this poem because, number one, it's very concise, and it's about meeting with her finally at some point. And in this case, in winter, I have just imagined winter time as being an ideal time to actually physically meet my girlfriend, who I'm in a long distance relationship with, and it's just such is not what it seems. Sort of cast like a mystery to it. It gives a mystery, so there's something more to this than it seems, and it's anything. I mean, anything goes in poetry, right? So let me read you another one. Take my ransom for granted while I kiss the stone. Feeling alone is not alone. Beauty invokes grief through the prism of conscience. When light streaks cleverly to show the motes for scrambling cowards, my heart is struck. Oh, your eyes are amazed horizons. Such a glimpse of priceless prayer awakens the growing cosmic urge. I expand my love year by year. You are always more than meaningful. Very deep love poem. Kind of deals with the a personal, intensity of emotion that you contain in love, and a lot of these poems justify the right to be lonely in the sense that um, it's okay to be alone. It's okay. I mean, a lot of great minds have enjoyed solitude. Uh, if you're feeling lonely today, tomorrow, during this year, if the COVID crisis has made you despair and despondent, it's quite all right. It's going to be okay. We're going to make it through this. All of us are in this same thing together. So it'll be very much be a uh, thing that we will make together, and we will have plenty of space and time to overcome this. It will be overcome, and the force is holding us down will not keep us down. So we can continue loving each other from a distance as we have to do, as long as we have the social forces holding us apart, and the COVID crisis, which is still, as far as I'm concerned, is dubious. I don't understand it. I don't understand the economic problems that we're putting on ourselves and so forth with all of this. So I just want to say that I'm with all of you out there who are viewing right now, who will hear me. I hope that this thing will be done with soon. I hope with all of the loneliness and despondency. We just can't stand it anymore. It's just getting to the point where it's going to be breaking point for all of us, I think. So hopefully we'll be back to normal, hopefully very soon, with the permission of our wonderful government. But I want to read some more poetry. That's what this is about. Let me read some from another section. This is the title section, and this is what Stone in the Square symbolizes: building a home. Together we build this bulging site, home of our arching bodies, for together we fill with delight, sensual dimension of our predilections. Your mind is my stone, my body is your square. Together we form isolated currents in the thinly wrought air. And we have Nick with us right now. Hey, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, how are you, Dustin?
Doing all right. we were just entertaining the viewership. I'm glad you made it today, and I was kind of worried that maybe you got lost on us.
Well, electronically, I'm always lost.
Yeah, quite all right. It happens. I mean, it's just good that you're with us. So I guess we've read your bio, so people are aware of who you are. So I will just start in and just jump right in with the questions. So my first one is, what inspires your poetry, and are there any subjects you particularly like to write about?
Yes, and there are proverbially the typical ones: death and nature, and I write a lot about um, illicit affairs. It interests me about prostitution, and I've done a number of pieces on that. But I write about everything that comes to me, and sometimes get into trouble for doing it.
Right. And I think poetry should stir a little trouble here and there. Yeah, stir the pot a little bit. I know several friends who are very much poetic stirrers of the pot.
Yeah, yeah.
Not for everybody sometimes.
Yeah, I know how to stir the pot.
So, speaking of stirring the pot, what are some interesting comments you've heard about your work from other people who've read it or are familiar with it?
Well, the most flattering thing I've ever heard came recently with as blurbs for one of my new books. It said that I write like Donald Hall, have the style of Donald Hall, and Ted Kooser, and the passion of Mark Dottie and Frank O'Hara. And I can't think of any better company I'd rather keep.
Interesting. So, I mean, you seem to have had a really good knack for awards and recognitions from, you had Denise Levertov, for instance, and Howard Nemerov have, given your poetry a nod through these awards. So how does it feel to be recognized by, such important names, and do they affect your self-perception as a poet?
Well, yes, the Denise Levertov story is one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
She judged the National Writers Union competition, and I came in first, second, and third. And I'm not bragging, I'm just amazed. But she sent me a postcard, which is now in her vault of letters, and said she was coming to OSU and would like to meet me. So one March windy day, I went across the campus and walked in late, and the only chair at this end of this long table in a conference room was vacant, and it was like at her elbow. And I understand once I sat down why it was vacant, because it had a broken leg. So during the whole thing, I tried to balance my chair. But apparently she had asked people to send poems in advance, and she would critique them. And I sat there and saw her pile of poems, and she butchered every one of them. And then I looked down and I saw mine coming up on the stack, and I thought, oh no, because I hadn't even submitted any, except she had mine from the contest.
Okay.
So she read it, and after she read it, she said, now that's poetry. And I almost fell off my chair, and I think there were probably about 30 different knives thrown at me from the other members who were sitting around the table. But then the next day, she spoke, and no, I'm wrong about that. It was the night before I had met her for the first time. I was in the front row in this lecture hall, and it was packed, just packed. And she came to the lectern and said, I have two things I want to say first before I read. And the first thing she said, I don't remember. And the second thing she said was, I'd like to meet Nicolas Macioci afterwards. And again, I'd not met her yet. So she's looking at me in the first row, and I'm looking at her in the first row, and we don't even know whom we're looking at. So those are my Denise Levertov stories. But we did write a little bit to each other. And then, of course, she passed away. But that's my Denise Levertov story.
Interesting. I guess she could tear apart poetry and say, this is the poem, or
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure she had a very critical mind, being the great poet she was herself, and the inventive mind she had. That's quite interesting that she pulled your poem out and said, "This is poetry," and everybody else, she's like, "Okay, yeah, this needs work. This needs work." Very interesting. And how did you feel about that? That's quite an interesting story.
Um, how do I feel about that having happened, or about the story?
Well, I mean, just the fact that she recognized you, such I guess you could call a noble-minded poet, recognizing
Well,
your work is
I had a
worthy.
hard time after that
Hmm.
getting out of that room because my head wouldn't fit through the door. It was-
Again, it's the door. It's
yeah,
I have a hard time fitting it through there. Yeah, I guess that can happen to anybody, the best of us. Yeah.
I'm
So,
very, I'm very proud of that moment, and
absolutely.
I do not take it for granted.
Yeah. Yeah, I love her poetry, and I was sort of friends with Sam Hamill, at least on Facebook, and he knew her pretty well too.
Hmm.
And I have really good friends with one of his old friends, and he passed away recently too, so that's really sad. But he was an excellent poet as well.
Hmm.
How would you describe your style of poetry, and what are some of your? You mentioned Donald Hall and Ted Kooser. What are some of your poetic influences?
Influentially, Mary Oliver,
Hmm.
Donald Hall, Jane Kenyon, um, Ted Kooser, uh, James Wright. I, if there's a common denominator there, and for me, and aside from brilliance and really interesting poetry, it's all pretty much accessible. And that's
Hmm.
something that I really, really insist on in my work, is that it be accessible.
Okay.
Um, so much of poetry is not. And that's why when you say the word poetry to the general public, they cringe and go the other way, is
Right.
because they've been brought up on things that are not accessible, and that they have to have a series of textbooks with them, or reference books, in order to crack the vault and get into what the meaning is, if there is one.
Hmm.
But those are some of my major influences, I believe. I have to say. I mean, it starts back with Keats and Shelley and
Hmm.
the Romantics. Although I think probably people would say I'm part of the graveyard crew, because people are always accusing me of writing dark things.
Hmm.
I do.
Yeah.
The birds in the spring tweet and then they fall out of the tree dead.
Hmm.
But it's just my inclination to write that way.
Right. You think the style of a poet is inherent to their nature, maybe, and not so much something they contrive?
Um, yeah, yes to your question. I think that's true, but I also think there's some exceptions where people um, don a kind of persona and a kind of style, and maybe that's sometimes why it doesn't work, because they're not being true to themselves as a self. Um, I know some people personally that I feel that way about,
Mhm.
but I think typically your style reflects who you are.
Right.
Um, at least that's the way I feel about it. Um, I think honesty in poetry is another concept that needs to be looked at, because uh, people always say write about what you know. Well,
Mhm.
that's easier said than done.
Right.
I know that recently, one of my recent books, um, I if it hadn't been for Michael Hathaway, the editor and publisher of Chiron, and reading his work and communicating with him, I think that a book like Dark Guitar wouldn't have come into existence,
Mhm.
because that's the most honest book I think I've ever written, even though I feel the rest are at least attempts at being honest. Um, that's the most honest one. And it's because of his influence. Um, I got to stop. I'm babbling.
Quite all right. It's what interviews you have a long conversation, and I think what you're saying is essentially how honesty is within poetry, and sometimes it's hard to just like be perfectly yourself in a poem, and you've done these different poetry devices, and you use all these things to obscure yourself within the poem. And maybe it takes like another person to say, well, you need to be more honest. Actually had a friend of mine say one time, I see your voice in the poem, it's very strong, but I don't see you in the poem. And so I was like, she's like, I need you to see if you can write something more vulnerable, which I did. I wrote more autobiographical style, straightforward, plain spoken, low key, no concepts or stylistics. So I think sometimes the person standing on the outside saying, I really like this, but try this, it can make you kind of step outside your bounds a little bit. Interesting that took another editor saying, helping you kind of pull yourself out a little bit of the poems and did the work. And it's very fascinating to me how relationships and communications actually affect the nature of the art itself that's being created. And none of us exist in a vacuum, for instance.
When I look back on the earlier stuff, I can see my masks, and there's a kind of honesty in them, but there isn't the truth that comes out in this book. It comes out way back then, but it's always kind of wearing a mask, like I say. I mean, I think there's some decent stuff that from the earlier years, but I kind of feel like a cheat at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
When you look back at some of your younger work, you're seeing again the stylistics and not the raw voice coming out.
Right.
So that took time to sort of pull out. I think, and another example of that is Yeats, who used a lot of mythological and symbolical stuff, and then he kind of grew out of that into his own voice after a period of years. So how do you feel now? I mean, you say you look back on your old work and you say, okay, I feel like I'm kind of not totally myself there. There's masks there. How do you bring out that authenticity and still maintain the poetic qualities in a poem?
Well, I think everything was in place except one curtain that needed pulled. And reading Michael Hathaway's stuff did it. I thought, if he can do it, if he can be that honest, then I can too. And that set me in that direction. That's really the end of the story, because I was enjoying what I was writing, although I did quit writing for about 17 years because of an incident I had on my first book. I had some misinformation in one of the poems, and a family member got very upset about it. And that alarmed me. Plus, I was really very successful for being so new at it. I felt like a factory after a point. All the reasons why I wrote were being eclipsed by just producing more and more work. And joy, entertainment, self-realization, all the reasons why you create art had been eclipsed by just the need to produce more. And because I was really flying high, like you said about the contest, that isn't even the complete list. I didn't bother to make a complete list ever, but I was very lucky.
Right. You have to have some talent in there too, some elbow grease in that. It's not somehow. I mean, you can't just. I've entered a lot of contests. They reject me automatically. I'm out in the beginning. I think I've won a few. I've had a little luck here and there. But I've entered several, and most of them have just been out right in the first round. They're like, they email me within a week, and they're like, "You're gone. You're out. Sorry." I think that's most people though. As go through that, and I honestly feel like, I don't know how you feel, like editors and of a lot of journals don't really have a lot of sense, or they have too much read versus like sitting down with it as like I could read Keats and be really drawn into it and enjoy it versus reading to judge a contest, and you have to read all of these works and all of this stuff, and you don't give it the space and time you need to really think on it and whether or not it's quality work or if it just appeals to you in the moment. I think is a lot of readers,
Well, you're making me think about something that I think is related. I'm very concerned, and nothing I can do about it, but I'm very concerned about the number of people who are writing. It really makes it difficult to get published. And, when I was thinking about doing a doctorate, creative doctorate, I think there were 4 schools that offered that at the time. Cornell was one of them that I had my eye on. And now it's like, what college, what university doesn't offer an MFA program? I mean, they're rolling them out like McDonald's hamburgers. And I feel that in the publishing part of the business, that just so much. I wouldn't want to be an editor at this point because you'd go blind just trying to read 1 month's worth of stuff. But yeah, it's kind of a pet peeve that everybody is writing. Some of it's pretty predictable. Some
a lot of gatekeepers too.
Yeah. And some of it is brilliant, but it's separating the two that becomes the job.
Right. So we're going to take a brief break, and then we'll come back and hear a few of your wonderful works. This is Parrot Literary Corner, and we have Nick Macioci. Enjoy some music.
Keep watching the New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
And we're back with Nicolas Macioci. He's going to read a couple of poems for us, so go for it, Nick.
Okay, I'm going to read the one that Denise Levertov called poetry.
Okay, love to hear it.
It's called Roadside Mortal. I grow orange, oxidized by 4 o'clock windshield reflections. Cows drip sun, flick the excess from their tails. Plump milkweed ash scatters before it is touched. Tribal leaves gather, war-painted, dance a zigzag step. Charge the wind like perfect warriors. To the south, heavy with the sky's weight of blue, clouds stoop low, show the white of their spines. Birds with an artist's skill color the air, the flash of their wings, a sequence of sparks fluctuates. They find a secret exit and disappear before the eye can translate distance. Everything outside is united within me. Rocks, wilderness, the non-blinking spider's eye gouge my brain with enormous existing. Out there, day moves on, and the emotions closest to the body glow like the shine of wheat. On such a day, I deliberately think of the dead, their coffin darkness, their total absence from a world alive with details. It is a relief to stop the car, a great victory to open the door and be certain I have not vanished. I'm referring to the cold relief I feel as I step to the ground and find the grass still turning to light.
A lot of color imagery there. A lot of mentions of orange, blue, white.
Yep.
Very sight-oriented poem, I think. Very nice.
Thank you.
What do you think differentiated that poem and Denise Levertov's mind from the other poems that she read?
I have no idea. That question has been in my mind ever since she chose it, and I don't know the answer.
One of the things I've heard about poetry, one of the things that characterizes as a unified idea within the poem, all the things unified. And I think that one has a very unified sense to it, from my impression.
Okay.
That's just how I felt about it. That excellent work. I love the color imagery and the cows and spiders and all of these things going on, and interesting. So if you'd like to read another one for us, we'd love to hear it.
Okay. I was recently nominated for Best of the Net. I don't know if you'd like to hear that, or one of the favorites called Knife that everybody seems to like. I have two former students, and you've interviewed one of them, Sandy Feen.
Yes.
She's one of my former students, and James Borders is another. They're both wonderful writers. I'll read Knife next, because it's been so popular. I don't understand why again, but it is.
All right.
The point of my father's knife thunked into the arm of the rocker in which my mother held me, exposing tiny tendrils of wood less than an inch from my infant head. My mother's eyes had tried to freeze the knife's motion, reverse it to the hand from which it had flown. The first time I heard this story, I went immediately to the rocking chair to find the scar, the steel claw mark of what could have killed me. I scrutinized the wood, ran a hand over the arm. I asked my mother if she was sure it had ever happened. She too ran her hand over the worn pine, discovering nothing but the blood-sticky residue of furniture polish. She seemed amazed that something so cruel could have vanished so completely. Eventually, the rocker disappeared, but not the habit of feeling the chair arm, for the knife cut, for the sudden change in grain from smooth surface to raw edge, the smallest rip in the wood, a sliver of surviving proof.
Very descriptive and very particular in its descriptions, and it has a lot of sort of masculine imagery with the knife and the wood. And it has a lot of strong, emotive, descriptive words and description in general. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
If you'd like to read the one you had for Best of the Net that you were mentioning, that you can read a third one.
Oh, you mean you'd rather hear that than Bobby Barebutt?
You can read what you like.
I actually have a book called Rustle, Rustle, Thump, Thump, which is full of satire and humor, allegedly. But no, I'll read the one that was selected as Best of the Net. And again, I don't know why, but it was.
Okay.
The artist observes a dead tree. 5 separate offshoots of one tree trunk twist into each other. It looks as if a giant has braided the limbs together into one gnarled distortion. Nothing is more naked than barren limbs when everything understood about a tree is dead. What illness killed the annual rings? Or was it stone cold nothing of old age that stripped it bare? There will be no more listening to language of restless leaves. Maybe somewhere its heart still struggles. As the book says, everything has a psyche. Someday, someone will paint, sculpt, or photograph it because it is misshapen, malformed, and gnarled. Some people hunger for the ugly, enjoy breathing dark thoughts, and even adore the deterioration of stars. This tree is nothing now but a rupture in the earth, from which birds still speak echoes. This tree represents impeccable death, wrapped in the question of what it is still doing here. Someday, an artist, swayed by appreciation, sympathy, or regret, will paint this tree that has poked a hole in heaven from which a surprise of butterflies will pour out of the opening.
Quite a wise poem. I would say it's a lot of wisdom in there about people sometimes loving the ugly, and you kind of go into a little bit of why maybe people love the ugly or distorted and twisted things, how it represents some sort of psychic thing in their own mind, or how they relate to that. And then in the end, of course, the butterflies flying out, and as the person's maybe painting or drawing the wood, and that's really nice, a really lovely poem that has a lot of depth and thought to it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for reading that. So what are some journals you regularly read poetry-wise?
I don't read anything but poets and writers, but I read a lot of poetry books. Every time I turn around, somebody's giving me one or I'm buying one. So I do read a lot of poetry, maybe 12 mystery books a year or less.
Okay.
And then mostly poetry, because I immerse myself in words. Words. I don't believe in writer's block. I'm very prolific, and I feel that as long as there are words, I can write. And words inspire me. Even looking at a newspaper, just to see the words on the sheet unleashes something in me. I mean, it sounds kind of corny, but it does.
Right.
I mean, there are times when I have a specific theme, or there's been an incident that inspires me, and that's the key word there, inspires me to write. But I don't wait for inspiration. I just refuse to, because I don't want to use that as an excuse not to write.
Interesting. So I like to pull words, like when I hear words, either in reading or when I'm, I don't know if I'm just going down the road or something, or I hear something in a song and I pull it out. I pull it out and use it as inspiration sometimes. As I also like the words, the structure and the sound of words and thoughts behind them, and how that how that relates to the art itself. So, what are your future plans for new publications, new books that you're releasing? Maybe do you have any plans right now?
I have a book or two coming out in January. One of them is from Spartan Press or Kung Fu Treachery Press, and the other one is from a New York press, Adelaide.
Adelaide.
Adelaide, yeah. One of them is called A Feast of Losses, and the other one is called Stony Seasons. I'm currently finishing a book called My Hands Fell Empty, which is a phrase I took from James Wright's poem, Quest. Before we go, I want to compliment you on being such a superb interviewer.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I think we got a little more time left. So I'm curious, what are you reading right now that is intriguing you and keeping your mind active?
James Wright's complete.
James Wright?
Yep. His complete.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I have his collected poetry somewhere around my house. I like him as well.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Do I have time for one more poem?
Let's do it. Go right ahead.
I want to mention that it's from a book called Why Dance, which was published early in my career. It was my second book. And unfortunately, the publisher editor was killed in a head-on car crash. So I've always thought some of my best work is in that book. And so recently, I was introduced to William DeVault, who's a brilliant writer and an excellent publisher. And he wanted to publish it. So it's a hardbound book now. But this poem is from that book. I think some of my better stuff is in Why Dance. It's called Tire.
Okay.
You bent a finger, hooked your last cigarette, fumbled it like a lame bird from its cellophane nest shortly before midnight on a Saturday. Your thumb and forefinger pinched together the almost severed halves, and after several drags, that very cigarette threatened to drop its dangerous head into your lap. So you tossed it like a diminutive, unwanted star out the speeding car window. At the same time, your left rear tire balloon popped its breath through a throat-sized hurricane hole, then bogged down heavier than 100 buckets of wet sand. You cursed aloud. The car mad danced to a stop. You opened the door, dropped to your knees like a priest, not to pray, but to wing the lug wrench until it spun like a silver propeller. One lug nut after another fell into your hand like horse chestnuts from black autumn branches. It was when you raised both arms to remove the tire from its wheel that the oncoming car tore into your blood and bones. With less resistance than tall grass would have offered, you crumpled to the bottom of your life without a chance to wonder why you couldn't hold yourself together the way you'd held together the halves of your last cigarette.
Like the way it's the motion that goes on there. It's a very cyclical poem. I mean, you begin with the cigarette and you end with the cigarette, and there's a lot of, I guess you could call them touch words or touch phrases. Feeling of the sense of touch throughout in that poem. Like you had the first poem you read was very colorful, out of color language, and here this is about a lot of texture and feeling and motion going on. Very nice, and I can see the title. Where the title comes from to a degree from that sort of use of motion in those poems. In that poem particularly, yeah.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
What made you so brilliant?
So brilliant. I'm very flattered you say that. A lot of hard work, actually. I've been writing steadily since I've been, I started when I was a sophomore in high school to take it seriously. I read Sylvia Plath, and from there it was like I'm no return. And it just was a lot of serious, concentrated, thoughtful work and revision of my style until I came to a degree of basically taking my poetry and not being overly stylistic, as you said, and being honest. And at the same time, having something to a degree you can think about. I don't want to be too opaque, and I don't want to be too, it just comes from realizations in reading. I'm really obsessed with language. I really love language, and I just mule over these poems constantly. I just like, when I write a poem, I read it 15, 20 times to make sure it makes sense to me or it feels right. It's really an obsession and a lot of work for me, and it's been a primary focus of my life, I think, has been writing and poetry specifically. Thank you for the compliment.
You're welcome.
And as far as interviewing, I guess that comes from a background in being surrounded by psychologists all my life and learning listening skills and dealing with people. Sometimes that's something that it takes a little time and effort, and also caring about people is very important to me. Just listening and learning from people and what they have to say, and that's a very much a thing that I do. So, in closing, would you like to offer some words of advice for the audience and the viewers out there?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. One is, of course, be true to your subject and to yourself, but be careful how many people you show your work to. I don't think that it's wise to take a piece and pass it around. I've always had one or two people in my life that I could depend on because they were bright, loved poetry, knew enough that I trusted their judgment. And Sandy Feen's one of them.
Okay.
Even though she's a former student, she's smarter than I am. That's for sure. I've learned from her. But that would be my main advice: is don't try to show it to everybody.
Right.
Have somebody that you trust and buddy up or do a mentoring thing, and that works pretty well for me.
Excellent. That's a very original advice. I haven't heard anything like that since we started this program. That's interesting. Would you like to thank any people out there, friends, family, some of your beta readers, maybe?
I would like to thank Chuck Sammons, who's the president of the Ohio Poetry Association, for being such a good friend and helping me with my poetry sometimes. And Sandy Fiend for being such a good writer and helping me with my poetry sometimes. And James Borders, another former student, and Wim DeVault, and my publisher, Jason Reberg, and let's see, whom I forgot. I know I have somebody. I don't mean to leave anybody out, but thank you for the opportunity to be on the show. I really enjoyed it, and I enjoy my conversation with you.
I enjoyed it as well. It's quite a fun affair to talk with other poets and get to know them and their craft and what inspires them and what they're reading, and et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for joining us, Nick. It's been wonderful and pleasant talking with you.
Thank you.
So this has been the Parrot Literary Corner. We had Nicolas Macioci today. I hope you enjoyed the wonderful and lively discussion, as well as the beginning with poetry from the Stone and the Square. If you don't have a copy of that, please pick it up and tell me what you think of it. And remember, you can donate to this program to help us improve production, improve our quality of our programming at paypal.me/nyparrot. It's there at the banner. Support this program, paypal.me/nyparrot. If you want to be on the program, we need guests. We love guests. We would love to hear from you. And you can get in touch with me at literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. And that's the official email for this program. And for me, Dustin Pickering, I will answer you as soon as I can. And I would I would absolutely love if people bought the wonderful anthology we worked hard on, Series 1 of the Literary Parrot. Series 2 will be out December 1st. So we're working on that now, and we'll be in touch with our guests to submit to that. The guests that have been from the late July until, of course, the conception of the book. So I appreciate our viewers. If you haven't subscribed to our channel on YouTube, if you're watching and you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Blank, you'll be in touch with us. And please just don't forget, you can contact me to be a guest writer at Literary Corner at newyorkparrot.com. That banner right there gives you my email. And I'm Dustin Pickering. This has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner, and we had Nick Macioci today. And we appreciate all our viewers. We appreciate you, writers, viewers, and readers out there watching this program. I hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you for viewing. The Literary Corner, brought to you by New York Parrot TV, The Voice. Hi, this is the most amazing collection I have read so far. I'm a reading-aholic. Dustin Pickering, you know me from Parrot Literary Corner. This is the Literary Parrot, available at Amazon.com and its various affiliates. If you have not seen this collection, it's 249 pages of glorious global literature in a contemporary vein. This covers a lot of subjects, from the coronavirus to violence on the streets, to love, to romance. Everything you can imagine is in this collection, and you should buy it now. I'll tell you why. It's a collection of unique voices from the Literary Parrot. People have been on our show, have participated in this, or have been published on our website, newyorkparrot.com. So please, I implore you, buy a copy. Thank you, and The Literary Corner, brought to you by New York Parrot TV.